Star lines fractured into stars as Bane dropped his ship out of hyperspace on the farthest edge of the remote system, before continuing slowly towards its only habitable planet, a small world locked in orbit around a pale yellow star. The planet's official name was Lihon, but it was more commonly referred to as the Unknown World. Nearly 3,000 years before, in this insignificant system located beyond the farthest edges of explored space, Darth Revan and Malak had discovered the Rakata, an ancient species of Force users that had ruled the galaxy long before the birth of the Republic. The two had also discovered the Starforge, an incredible orbiting space station and factory, and a monument to the power of the dark side. A great battle had been fought here between the Republic, led by a redeemed Revan, and Darth Malak's Sith. Malak had fallen, the Sith were routed, and the Starforge had been destroyed. Even now, the remnants of that titanic battle remained. As soon as Bane's feet touched Leon's surface, he felt it. A deep thrumming, similar to what he'd first felt on Korriban, but much, much stronger. Even the air felt different, heavy with ancient history and secrets long forgotten. Then a rancor burst forth from the trees and began loping across the sand. Bane simply held out a hand, and it stopped in its tracks. Submitting the beast to the power of the dark side, Bane leapt up onto its back, and at his command, the rancor lumbered off, leaving the beach behind and heading into the forest, carrying him towards the ancient Rakatan temple. Bane had almost given up when he found what he was looking for. A Sith holocron, remarkably smooth and devoid of any etchings or markings. Trembling, he set the holocron gently onto the floor, then sat before it. He crossed his legs and began the deep, slow breathing of the meditative trance, gathering and focusing his energy. Bane projected a wave of dark side power out to engulf the small relic on the floor. The holocron began to sparkle and shimmer in response. A small beam of light projected out from the top. The particles scattered and diffused. They began to shift and spin, coalescing into a cloaked figure, its features completely hidden by the hood of its heavy robe. Then a voice spoke, crisp and clear.
I am Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith.
The empty halls of the temple above trembled with the reverberations of Bane's triumphant, booming laughter. Revan had discovered many of the rituals of the ancient Sith, and as the holocron's avatar explained their nature and purpose, Bane could barely wrap his mind around their awesome potential. Revan had been a true Sith Lord, unlike the simpering masters who bowed to Kaan and his Brotherhood. And soon, all his knowledge would belong to Bane.
By its very nature, the dark side invites rivalry and strife. This is the greatest strength of the Sith. It culls the weak from our order. Yet this rivalry can also be our greatest weakness. The strong must be careful, lest they be overwhelmed by the ambitions of those beneath them, working in concert. Any master who instructs more than one apprentice in the ways of the dark side is a fool. In time, the apprentices will unite their strength and overthrow the master. It is inevitable, axiomatic. That is why each master must have only one student.
Bane's revelation was that the strength of numbers was a trap, one that had snared all the great Sith Lords of the past. Many had gotten close, but all had ultimately failed to destroy the Jedi. He now understood why. Naga Sadow, Exar Kun, even Darth Revan, all had been Sith of awesome and terrifying power. All had drawn in droves of followers, legions of dark side acolytes that eventually had banded together to overthrow their masters. The strongest among them would then become the next master. Thus, The line of Sith had become a perpetuated cycle of weakness. Bane realized that for the Sith to thrive, two, and only two, could exist at any one time. A master to hold the power, and an apprentice to crave it. The rule of two. Only once the apprentice had surpassed the master would the line continue, leading to the master's death at the hands of his pupil and the search for a new apprentice. This would allow the Sith to bide their time as their order became steadily stronger, until one powerful enough to fulfill Bane's dream of destroying the Jedi would come to existence. As Bane now knew, the Sith's greatest weapons were cunning and deception. The Brotherhood had diverged from that path, and thus they needed to be wiped clean from the face of the galaxy. Qasim was dead. He had approached Bane during the last of the Holocron's lessons, parlaying him to rejoin the Brotherhood and help Kaan destroy the Jedi once and for all. When Bane had refused, Qasim had attacked. Bane was not ashamed to admit that he had almost lost. Qasim was one of the greatest, if not the best, duelist in the Sith Order. But his skills with the lightsaber had not saved him when Bane had brought down the Rakatan Temple upon him. Now his blade, as well as he, laid buried in meters of stone. Bane had then left the planet that had been his home for the past few weeks, and sent a hollow message to Lord Kaan. He'd pleaded, begged, to be readmitted into the Brotherhood, told them he was lost, without direction. He'd put on so striking an act that, watching it back, even Bane himself was starting to believe it. But that wasn't important. What was that with the message, Bane had sent the schematics behind the ritual of the thought bomb. He knew Kaan would read it, and reread it, and study it, until all the steps to the world-killing spell lay ingrained in the Sith Lord's mind. He knew that, eventually, when the Sith were at their lowest point, Kaan would turn to it for salvation. That moment would be the Brotherhood's doom. But first, he was on his way to meet Githany on the dark side nexus of Ambria. He hoped she wouldn't disappoint him. Bane had felt the poison the moment their lips had met, and realized that she had been sent by Kaan to kill him. Still, he ravished in the pain, used it to fuel his dark powers. For a moment, he had wondered if Githany could become his apprentice. But no, she believed too strongly in Kaan and the Brotherhood to ever truly accept his knowledge. They had parted ways then, each confident in the success of the encounter. Only hours later did Bane realize that Githany had played into his overconfidence and covered the toxin of the deadly Synox with a lesser poison. Although he was ashamed to admit it, he had almost died. And if he had, the rule of two, the greatest revelation of the Sith in millennia, would have died with him. Fortunately, Ambria was not only home to deformed creatures and abominations of the dark side. It was also the refuge of the legendary healer Caleb. But upon finding the healer, Bane had been denied treatment. He had tried everything from physical threats to mental domination. But even in the face of Bane's awesome power, Caleb's will held strong. It was then that Bane had sensed the presence of another individual, Caleb's daughter, and only when Bane moved to kill her did Caleb finally relent. Fully healed, Bane was now on his way to Ruusan. He knew the following weeks would hold both the destruction and salvation of the Sith. Even while explaining the strategy to their next attack on the now flailing Jedi, Kaan had to stop short as a dark shadow fell across his tactical map. Behind him, an enormous mountain of a man stood in the doorway, blocking the light streaming in from outside. He was tall and completely bald, with a heavy brow and hard, unforgiving features. He wore black armor and the robes of a Sith, and a hook-handled lightsaber hung at his side. Though he had never met the man before, Lord Kaan had heard enough about him to know exactly who he was. Darth Bane! He exclaimed. He cast a quick glance in Githany's direction, wondering if she had betrayed him. But from the expression on her face, it was obvious she was just as surprised to see their visitor alive and well. "We thought you were dead," he began uncertainly. "How did—" "I'm tired," Bane interrupted. "Do you mind if I sit?" "Of course," Kaan quickly agreed. "Anything for a brother." The big man sneered as he settled into one of the nearby chairs. "Thank you, brother." There was something in his tone that put Kaan's guard up. What was he doing here? Did he know that Githany had tried to poison him? Did he know that Kaan had sent her? "Please continue on with your strategy," Bane urged with a casual wave of his hand. Kaan's hackles rose. It was as if he was being given permission to continue, as if Bane was the one in charge. Gritting his teeth, he looked down at the map again and resumed where he had left off. "As I was saying, the Jedi are hiding in the forests. We can flush them out if we split our numbers. Then, by deploying our flyers, we can flank their southern lines." Bane slammed the desk as he rose. "Deploying flyers and flanking armies," he mocked, rising to his feet and thrusting an accusing finger at Kaan. "You're thinking like a dirt general, not a Sith Lord." A heavy silence had fallen across the room. Even Kaan was left speechless. He could feel all eyes on him, watching intently to see what would happen next. Bane stepped in close, his face just centimeters from Kaan's own. "How did you ever find the guts to poison me?" he asked in a low, menacing whisper. That wasn't me," Kaan stammered as Bane turned his back on him. "Don't apologize for using cunning and trickery," the big man admonished, moving over to the strategy table. "I admire you for it. We are Sith, the servants of the dark side," he continued, bending down to study the troop positions and tactical layouts spread out before him. "Now look at this map and think like a Sith. Don't just fight in the forest, destroy the forest." It was glorious. The power of the entire Sith Order focused in a single being. This was how it was supposed to be. The storm rolled down from the plateau and rumbled across the forest. Hundreds of forks of searing lightning shot down from the sky, and the forest erupted. Trees burst into flames, the blaze racing through the branches and spreading out in all directions. The underbrush smoldered, smoked, and ignited, and a wall of fire swept across the planet's surface. The inferno consumed everything in its path. But as quickly as it had risen, the feeling of invincibility faded. For several seconds, Bane was completely disoriented, unable to figure out what had happened. Then he understood. Kaan had broken the connection, and somehow he had managed to drag out the others along with him. Bane stood motionless as the Sith slowly regained their wits, and took to the sky in chase of the vulnerable Jedi. He saw Githany, and as he watched her run to join the others, he realized that she too had been corrupted by the teachings of Qordis in the Academy. Despite her promises to follow him, she couldn't see beyond the Brotherhood and its limitations. She was tainted, unfit to be his apprentice. She would have to die with all the others. For a moment, he watched her soar off. Then he climbed into his own flyer, but instead of following Kaan to the battle, he set a course back to the Sith camp. It was almost time. The camp was completely deserted, but Bane could feel the presence of another close behind as he landed his flyer near the main tent. Bane let his hand drop to his lightsaber, ready to unclip it at a moment's notice. But the flyer didn't attack. Instead, it swooped around the camp once, banked sharply, and came down for a landing beside his own. As the rider dismounted, Bane recognized him as Lord Qordis, the founder of the Academy of Korriban. Qordis then knelt before him, offering his allegiance to the young Darth. Bane was surprised. Was it possible that Qordis had finally seen the truth? Yet the Sith Lord's next words dispelled any such notion. He, too, could only see so far as the Brotherhood allowed. He, too, would have to be purged. Lashing out with the Force, Bane seized Qordis in an immobilizing, crushing grip, before strangling the breath from his lungs. Qordis let out a scream, but with no air in his lungs. It came out only as a rattling gasp that was lost beneath the snapping and crackling of his bones. Without even a second look, Bane stepped past him and into the tent. The Sith had held a blockade around the planet for the past several months, preventing any Jedi reinforcements from reaching the ground. Now it was time to change that. Switching on the comm, he ordered the Admiral to engage the Republic fleet, and although the order made no sense at all, she obeyed. Kaan could not believe his eyes, as a battle that had started out overwhelmingly in his favor began wriggling out of his grasp. A series of blasts from a descending Jedi gunship destroyed 3 more of his small flyers, and Kaan realized that his army was now suddenly outmatched. Swearing vile oaths against both the Jedi and his own people, Lord Kaan joined the retreat. Bane had felt Kaan's efforts to dominate his mind, but they had had no more effect than a rusted knife scraping against the hide plates of a Halurian ice boar. Nonetheless, he had seized upon the opportunity and delivered a performance worthy of the greatest dramatist on Alderaan. Kaan was convinced the thought bomb was the key to victory, and he was about to ensnare the rest of the Brotherhood in his web of madness. The second phase of Bane's plan was set in motion. By nightfall the next day, it would all be over. As he had done so many times before, Kaan had promised them victory. And as they had always done in the past, the Brotherhood had followed. Followed him here, to this cave. Though Githany wasn't sure if it was more accurate to say they had been led or lured. She had followed him along with everyone else, compelled by the passion of his words and the sheer magnitude of his personality and presence. But now, as the adrenaline faded away, she could finally see the truth. Bane had been right. Kaan was a madman, and she needed to get out of here. But caught up in the masses of fanatically loyal followers, she struggled to move past them. Beside her, Kaan started to chant. Githany was not the only one who had sensed something wrong with Lord Kaan. In the beginning, Lord Khopesh had also shared in the zeal of the thought bomb's power. But now that he was thinking rationally again, he realized the plan was utter insanity. Immediately, Khopesh started moving carefully towards the cavern's main exit. Escape was impossible, of course. The complex was sure to be surrounded by hundreds of Jedi. But in the end, he wanted to make sure it didn't matter to him. He would join the defenders on the surface in one last stand against the Jedi. His death would be of his own accord. Miles away, Bane felt the tremor pass through the Force as the bomb detonated. In his dying moments, Khopesh had warned the Jedi of the Sith's mad plan, and in an attempt to minimize the ritual's damage, Lord Hoth and 100 other Jedi had entered the tunnels to pacify the Sith Lord. He too was dead, along with Githany, Kaan, all of them. The Brotherhood of Darkness had been purged. As far as the Jedi knew, the Sith were now extinct. Bane intended to keep it that way.